Thank you for joining us around the fire. For more information or to make a donation, please visit randomactsnetwork.com. Now, want to hear a scary story?
Dark and stormy night. The streets were deserted except for the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the shadows. But even the lightning could not dispel the sense of foreboding that hung in the air. In a small house on the outskirts of town, Maria lay in bed, unable to sleep. She had been feeling uneasy for days, as if someone or something was watching her. She tried to tell herself that it was just her imagination, but the feeling persisted. Suddenly, she heard a strange noise outside her window. It sounded like the wailing of a woman, high and piercing. Maria sat up in bed, her heart pounding in her chest. She listened for a moment, and the noise grew louder and more urgent. She realized with a sickening feeling that this was the sound of La Llorona, the weeping woman. La Llorona was a legendary figure in Mexico, a ghostly woman who was said to have drowned her own children in a fit of jealous rage. Her spirit was said to roam the country, wailing for her lost children and seeking revenge on those who had wronged her. Maria had heard the stories of La Llorona since she was a child, but she had never believed in them. Now, as the sound grew closer, she realized that there was something terrifyingly real about the legend. She scrambled out of bed and ran to the window, peering out into the darkness. She could just make out a figure in the distance, a woman in a long white dress, her hair streaming in the wind. The woman was wailing louder now, and Maria felt a cold sweat breaking out on her forehead. Suddenly, the woman turned and looked directly at Maria. Her eyes were so dark and filled with hatred, and Maria felt a chill run down her spine. She stumbled backwards, tripping over a chair and falling to the ground. The woman was getting closer now, and Maria knew that she had to run. She scrambled to the door, fumbling with the lock in her panic. Finally, the door swung open, and she bolted outside into the pouring rain. She ran blindly through the streets, not daring to look back. The sound of La Llorona's wailing echoed in her ears, and she could feel the woman's eyes on her back. She knew that she was being chased, and that she was in mortal danger. Finally, she reached the town square, where a group of people had gathered to watch the storm. They turned to stare as she ran towards them, her hair plastered to her face and her eyes wild with fear. "La Llorona!" she cried. "She's after me!" The people looked at her in confusion, but Maria could see the fear in their eyes. They knew the legend of La Llorona, and that she was not to be trifled with. Suddenly, the wailing grew louder, and the people turned as one to face the source of the sound. Coming towards them, they saw La Llorona, her dress streaming in the wind, eyes fixed on Maria. The people scattered, running in all directions, but Maria stood frozen on the spot. The air had suddenly become freezing cold, and she knew that her time had come. But then something strange happened. The sound of the wailing faded away, and the figure of La Llorona began to dissolve like mist in the wind. Maria watched in amazement as the ghostly woman disappeared into nothingness, leaving only the sound of the rain and the thunder in her wake. For a moment, Maria stood there, stunned and bewildered. She had been so certain that she was going to be killed. Slowly, Maria began to make her way back to her house. She was still shaking from the experience, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in her, something that she couldn't quite understand. Over the next few days, Maria found herself becoming increasingly obsessed with the legend of La Llorona. She spent hours reading everything she could find about the ghostly woman, poring over old books and talking to anyone with a story to share. She talked to the old women in the town who had known the legend since childhood, and she scoured the archives of the local newspaper for any mention of La Llorona. There were reports of sightings of the ghostly woman stretching back over 100 years, and the stories of children who disappeared, never to be seen again. And there were rumors of a secret cult that worshipped La Llorona, performing dark rituals in her name, even sacrificing children so that she could live on. Underneath the sensational stories, Maria realized that there was more to La Llorona than she had ever imagined. The legends were not just about a vengeful ghost. They were about a woman who had suffered greatly, driven to madness by her own grief and despair. Her sympathy for the woman grew, as she understood how the pain of loss can be too much to bear. One night, Maria was walking home from the library, lost in thought, when she felt a sudden, sharp pain in her side. She looked down and saw that she had been stabbed with a knife, a deep gash running across her abdomen. She stumbled backwards, gasping for breath, and saw a figure in the darkness. A woman in a long, white dress. And then she saw another, and another. And Maria knew that she was going to die. As she fell to the ground bleeding, surrounded by women in white dresses, she could feel herself slipping away. And as she did, the ghostly woman appeared, standing out from the others with a slight glow. And Maria knew that it was the real La Llorona. Beneath the layers of agony, Maria felt a strange feeling of peace. She had found something that she had been searching for her entire life. She had found the truth.
With no more room left on Earth, and with Mars hanging up there empty of life, somebody hit on the plan of starting a colony on the red planet. It meant changing the habits and physical structure of the immigrants, but that worked out fine. In fact, every possible factor was covered, except one of the flaws of human nature. Adaptine is the secret of it. Adaptine, they called it first. Then it got shortened to Adaptine. It let us adapt. They explained it all to us when we were 10 years old. I guess they thought we were too young to understand before then, although we knew a lot of it already. They told us just after we landed on Mars. "You're home, children," the head teacher told us after we had gone into the glassite dome they built for us there. And he told us there'd be a special lecture for us that evening, an important one that we must all attend. And that evening, he told us the whole story, the whys and wherefores, He stood up before us. He had to wear a heated spacesuit and helmet, of course, because the temperature in the dome was comfortable for us, but already freezing cold for him, and the air was already too thin for him to breathe. His voice came to us by radio from inside his helmet. "Children," he said, "you are home. This is Mars, the planet on which you will spend the rest of your lives. You are Martians, the first Martians. You have lived 5 years on Earth and another 5 in space. Now you will spend 10 years until you are adults in this dome, although toward the end of that time you will be allowed to spend increasingly long periods outdoors. Then you will go forth and make your own homes, live your own lives as Martians. You will intermarry and your children will breed true. They too will be Martians. It is time you were told the history of this great experiment of which each of you is a part." Then he told us. Man, he said, had first reached Mars in 1985. It had been uninhabited by intelligent life. There is plenty of planet life and a few varieties of non-flying insects, and he had found it, by terrestrial standards, uninhabitable. Man could survive on Mars only by living inside glassite domes and wearing spacesuits when he went outside of them. Except by day in the warmer seasons, it was too cold for him. The air was too thin for him to breathe, and long exposure to sunlight, less filtered of rays harmful to him than on Earth because of the lesser atmosphere, could kill him. The plants were chemically alien to him, and he could not eat them. He had to bring all his food from Earth or grow it in hydroponic tanks. For 50 years he had tried to colonize Mars, and all his efforts had failed. Besides this dome which had been built for us, there was only one other outpost, another glassite dome much smaller and less than a mile away. It had looked as though mankind could never spread to the other planets of the solar system besides Earth. For all of them, Mars was the least inhospitable. If he couldn't live here, there was no use even trying to colonize the others. And then in 2034, 30 years ago, a brilliant biochemist named Weymouth had discovered daptine, a miracle drug that worked not on animal or person whom it was given, but on the progeny he conceived during a limited period of time after inoculation. It gave his progeny almost limitless adaptability to changing conditions, provided the changes were made gradually. Dr. Weymouth had inoculated and then mated a pair of guinea pigs. They had borne a litter of 5, and by placing each member of the litter under different and gradually changing conditions, he had obtained amazing results. When they attained maturity, one of those guinea pigs was living comfortably at a temperature of 40 below 0 Fahrenheit. Another was quite happy at 150 above. A third was thriving on a diet that would have been deadly poison for an ordinary animal, and a fourth was contented under a constant X-ray bombardment that would have killed one of its parents within minutes. Subsequent experiments with many litters showed that animals who had been adapted to similar conditions bred true, and their progeny was conditioned from birth to live under those conditions. 10 years later, 10 years ago, the head teacher told us, you children were born of parents carefully selected from those who volunteered for the experiment. And from birth, you have been brought up under carefully controlled and gradually changing conditions. From the time you were born, the air you have breathed has been very gradually thinned and its oxygen content reduced. Your lungs have compensated by becoming much greater in capacity, which is why your chests are so much larger than those of your teachers in attendance. When you are fully mature and are breathing air like that of Mars, the difference will be even greater. Your bodies are growing fur to enable you to stand the increasing cold. You are comfortable now under conditions which would kill ordinary people quickly. Since you are 4 years old, your nurses and teachers have had to wear special protection to survive conditions that seem normal to you. In another 10 years, at maturity, you will be completely acclimated to Mars. Its air will be your air, its food plants your food. Its extremes of temperature will be easy for you to endure, and its median temperatures pleasant to you. Already, because of the 5 years we spent in space, under gradually decreased gravitational pull, the gravity of Mars seems normal to you. It will be your planet to live on and to populate. You are the children of Earth, but you are the first Martians. Of course, we had known a lot of those things already. The last year was the best. By then, the air inside the dome, except the pressurized parts where our teachers and attendants live, was almost like that outside, and we were allowed out for increasingly long periods. It is good to be in the open. The last few months, they relaxed segregation of the sexes so we could begin choosing mates, although they told us there is to be no marriage until after the final day, after our full clearance. Choosing was not difficult in my case. I had made my choice long since, and I'd felt sure that she felt the same way. I was right. Tomorrow is the day of our freedom. Tomorrow we will be Martians, the Martians. Tomorrow we shall take over the planet. Some among us are impatient, have been impatient for weeks now, but wiser counsel prevailed and we are waiting. We have waited 20 years, and we can wait until the final day. And tomorrow is the final day. Tomorrow, at a signal, we will kill the teachers and the other Earthmen among us before we go forth. They do not suspect, so it will be easy. We have dissimulated for years now, and they do not know how we hate them. They do not know how disgusting and hideous we find them, with their ugly, misshapen bodies, so narrow-shouldered and tiny-chested. Their weak, sibilant voices that need amplification to carry in our Martian air, and above all, their white, pasty, hairless skins. We shall kill them, and then we shall go and smash the other dome, so all the Earthmen there will die too. If more Earthmen ever come to punish us, we can live and hide in the hills, where they'll never find us. And if they try to build more domes here, we'll smash them. We want no more to do with Earth. This is our planet, and we want no aliens. Keep off.
What good would Walter be? He can't help row the gondola,
said Angela. We were talking over our planned visit to Podolo the next day. And what will he say? I asked. If he comes back from his business and finds no wife to welcome him.
On the contrary,
said Walter,
I've often wished such a thing might happen.
And so, after much discussion with this lately married, charming, devoted couple, we agreed that Podolo should be the goal for tomorrow's picnic. I felt rather silly, for everything I had said about Podolo was merely conversational exaggeration, meant to whet their curiosity like a newspaper headline. And I knew that when Angela actually saw the dull little island, its stony and inhospitable shore littered with broken bottles and empty tins, she would think what a fool I was. So I took back everything I said, called my own bluff, as it were, and explained that I avoided Podolo only because of its location. It was 4 miles from Venice, and if a boisterous wind picked up, as it sometimes did without warning, we should find getting home to be difficult. Next morning, in brilliant sunshine, Walter gulped down his breakfast and started for the station. I stood on the balcony watching his departure. It seemed hard that he should have to spend 6 hours in a stuffy train. Podolo, I must say, was looking its best. Green, flowery, almost welcoming. We cast an anchor a few feet from the stony shore. Suddenly, Angela exclaimed,
"Why, there's a cat!"
Sure enough, there was. A little cat, hardly more than a kitten, very thin and scraggly, standing on the weedy stones at the water's edge. It was a pitiful sight.
Oh, it smelt the food. It's probably starving.
The poor beast,
cried Mario, the gondolier.
Its owners did not want it. It's been put here on purpose.
The idea that the cat had been left to starve caused him no great concern, but shocked Angela profoundly.
How abominable! We must take it something to eat at once.
I thought we might wait till the meal was over. The cat would not die before our eyes. But Angela could handle no delay, and the gondola was turned to land. Meanwhile, The poor thing meowed regularly, though it had retreated and was almost invisible, a thin wisp of tabby fur against the parched stems of the outermost grasses. Angela filled her hand with chicken bones and stepped delicately onto the slippery boulders.
If I can catch it, we'll take it to Venice. Left here, it'll certainly starve.
I watched her approach the cat. It ran away, but only a few yards. She threw a bit of food, and it came nearer, another, and it came nearer still. It grew less suspicious. Its tail rose in the air, and it came right up to Angela's feet. She pounced, but the cat slipped through her hands like water. Again, hunger overpowered mistrust. Back it came. Once more, Angela made a grab at it. Once more, the cat eluded her. But the third time she was successful. She got hold of its leg. It wriggled and squirmed and fought and made the angriest, wickedest sound I ever heard. Instead of growing louder as its fury mounted, the sound decreased in volume, as though the creature was choked by its own rage. The spitting died off into the thin ghost of a snarl, hardly more audible than the hiss of air from a punctured tire.
Poor beast. She ought not to treat it like that.
His face gleamed with satisfaction when, intimidated by the whirling claws, she let the cat drop. It streaked away into the grass, belly to the ground.
I nearly had it. I think I shall throw a coat over it next time.
Angela climbed back into the boat and ate her asparagus in silence. I began to wish we hadn't come to Podolo. It was not the first time a picnic there had gone badly.
I tell you what, if I can't catch it, I'll kill it. I could do it quite easily. It's only a question of dropping one of these boulders on it.
Mario was horror-struck. Starvation was in the course of nature, but to deliberately kill it?
It may be a messy business, but it'll soon be over. Poor little thing. Such a horrible life.
But we don't know that, I urged. If it could speak, it might say it preferred to live at all costs. But I couldn't move Angela from her purpose.
Let's go explore the island until it's time to bathe. The cat will be over its fright by then. I promise I won't murder it, except as a last resource.
The word murder lingered unpleasantly in my mind. You couldn't imagine a better place for one. The water was so warm one hardly felt the shock of going in. The only drawback was the mud, which clung to Angela's white bathing shoes. Nasty, sticky stuff. A little wind had got up, but the grassy rampart sheltered us. We leaned against it and smoked. Suddenly I noticed it was past 5. "We ought to go soon," I said. "We promised to meet Walter's train."
All right,
said Angela.
Just let me have a go at the cat first. We'll put the food out and watch.
There was no need to watch, for the cat appeared at once. Angela and I stole up behind it, but I inadvertently kicked a stone and the cat was off like a flash. Angela looked at me reproachfully. I retreated a few yards, but the cat, no doubt scenting a trap, refused to come out. Angela threw herself on the pavement.
I can see it. Give me 3 minutes and I'll catch it.
3 minutes passed. I felt concerned for Angela, her lovely hair floating over the dark hole, her face as much as one could see of it a little red. The air was getting chilly. "Look here," I said. "I'll wait for you in the gondola. When you've caught it, give a shout and I'll have the boat brought to land." Angela nodded. She dare not speak for fear of scaring her prey. From the gondola, I could just see the line of Angela's shoulders. Mario stood up, eagerly watching the chase.
She loves it so much that she wants to kill it.
"We ought to start," I called across the water. "Walter will be waiting at the station and wonder what has happened." Her mind was clearly on something else.
Oh, he'll find his own way home.
More minutes passed.
One must have patience with ladies.
I tried a last appeal. "What luck, Angela? Any hope of catching him?" There was a pause. Then I heard her say, in a curiously tense voice,
I'm not trying to catch him now.
We were irrevocably late to meet Walter, and the need for immediate hurry passed. Wrapped in a blanket to escape the winds, I fell asleep. Almost at once, it seemed, I began to dream. In my dream it was night. We were hurrying across the lagoon trying to meet Walter's train. I stopped rowing and looked around. The seat behind me was empty. "Angela!" I cried, but there was no answer. I grew frightened. "Mario!" I shouted. "We have left her behind. We must go back at once." The gondolier stopped rowing and turned towards me. I could just distinguish the wild look on his face.
We loved her, and so we had to kill her.
An uprush of panic woke me. I was restored to the sunshine. At least I thought so. In the ecstasy of returning to consciousness, I opened my eyes to the daylight, but they didn't receive it. I wondered if I was fainting, but a glance at my watch explained everything. I had slept past 8 o'clock. Mario slept on the deck. Before I had time to speak, he opened his eyes, like a dog.
You went to sleep, so I did too.
We both laughed. Is Angela asleep, or is she still trying to catch the cat?
That's where she was, but I can't see her now.
We strained our eyes towards the island, much darker than the surrounding sky, and called for her. There was no answer, no sound at all but the noise of the waves.
The cat wasn't big enough to hurt her, was it?
No, I said. It might have scratched her.
She was trying to kill it, wasn't she?
I nodded.
In this country, we are not accustomed to kill cats.
I asked him to call for her again. His voice was stronger than mine. Mario obeyed with a shout that might have raised the dead, but no answer came. "Well," I said briskly, trying to conceal my agitation, "we must go look for her." Mario didn't answer. "Walter will be getting worried." I could not understand why Mario, usually so quick to execute an order, did not move. He was staring straight in front of him.
There's someone on the island,
he said at last.
but it's not her.
Mario bent forward and touched the ground with his free hand. "It was a man, then?" I asked.
I have a pocket knife, but the blade is only so long.
Within a couple of minutes, we had beached. Mario kept the oar in his hand. We were standing by the place where we had last seen Angela. The grass was broken and bent. She had left a handkerchief as though to mark the spot. Otherwise, there was no trace of her. "He must have anchored round the other side," I said, "but let's look here first."
It didn't walk like a man.
We climbed the grassy rampart and began to walk round the shallow curve, stumbling over concealed brambles. From our little eminence, we could see clusters of lights twinkling across the lagoon, but no boat. We stared at each other, bewildered. "Are you quite certain it wasn't Angela you saw?" I asked. "How could you tell in the darkness?"
She was wearing a white dress.
said Mario at last.
This one is in all black, and it looked like a man's head.
I felt a curious sensation in my spine. "Mario," I said, "do you think he's got anything to do with her not being here?" Mario didn't answer. "I don't understand why he doesn't speak to us."
Perhaps he can't speak.
"Anyhow, we are 2 against 1. Come on." We soon lost sight of each other in the darkness, but I heard Mario swearing as he scratched himself on the thorny acacias. Right at the corner of the island, close to the water's edge, I found one of Angela's bathing shoes. She must have taken it off in a hurry, for the button was torn away. A little later, I made a rather grisly discovery. It was the cat, dead with its head crushed. The pathetic little heap of fur would never suffer the pangs of hunger again. Angela had been as good as her word. I was just going to call Mario when the bushes parted and I was swept off my feet. Something hurled itself upon me, alternately dragging and carrying me until I was pitched into the gondola and felt the boat move under me. "Mario!" I gasped. "We can't go away." The gondolier's white face stared silently. He was rowing with all his strength. The island began to recede. After a while, he sat down beside me and whispered,
When I found her, She wasn't quite dead.
I began to speak, but he held up his hand.
She asked me to kill her. Before it comes back, she said.
I looked behind us. Transparent darkness, save for one shadow that stained the horizon black. Podolo. Mario bent his head nearer, but his voice was almost inaudible.
And then she said,
"Speak up," I cried.
"It is starving too. And it won't wait."
It was just 20 years ago, and I had been out all day hunting with no sport to speak of, and I had lost my way. It was not a pleasant place in which to lose one's way, with the first feathery flakes of a coming snowstorm fluttering down, and the evening closing in. Not the faintest sign of life met my eyes in any direction. There was nothing to do but walk on, and take my chance of finding shelter. The snow began to come down with ominous steadiness, and the wind fell. The cold became more intense, and the night came rapidly up. My heart grew heavy as I thought of my young wife watching for me through the window, and thought of all the suffering in store for her throughout this weary night. This morning, when we parted, she had implored me to return before dusk, and I had promised her that I would. Even now, weary as I was, I felt I might still get back to her before midnight, if only guide and shelter could be found. I stopped and shouted every now and then, but my shouts seemed only to make the silence deeper. I began to remember stories of travelers who had walked on in the falling snow until, wearied out, they were fain to lie down and sleep their lives away. A wavering speck of light came suddenly out of the dark, shifting, disappearing, growing momentarily brighter and nearer. Running toward it at full speed, I found myself, to my great joy, face to face with an old man and a lantern. "Thank God!" was the exclamation that burst involuntarily from my lips. Blinking and frowning, he lifted his lantern and peered into my face.
What for?
"Well, for you. I've been lost in the snow. How far am I now from town?"
A good 20 miles, more or less.
"How about the nearest village, then?"
About 12 miles the other direction.
"Where do you live, then? Please, let me go with you." The old man shook his head and rubbed his nose reflectively with the handle of the lantern.
Ain't no use. The master won't let you in.
"Who is the master?" The gnome-like man was hobbling away through the falling snow. "You lead the way, and I'll engage that the master shall give me shelter."
You can try him.
A large mass loomed up presently out of the darkness, and a huge dog rushed out, barking furiously. I drew up close behind him, and saw that the door was heavily studded with iron nails, like the door of a prison. Once inside, I found myself in a great raftered hall. One end was piled to the roof with corn, like a barn. The other was stored with flour sacks, tools, and all kinds of lumber, while overhead hung hams, baskets, and bunches of dried herbs. In the center of the floor stood a telescope of very considerable size, mounted on a rude movable platform with 4 small wheels. It was gauntly dressed in a dingy wrapping cloth, and just as I lifted the fabric for a look, a bell rang sharply.
That's for you,
said my guide, with a malicious grin. He pointed to a low black door at the opposite side of the hall. I crossed over and went in without waiting for an invitation. A huge, white-haired old man rose from a table covered with books and papers and confronted me sternly.
Who are you? What do you want?
I told him I simply sought sustenance and sleep.
Jacob, how dare you admit this stranger? I didn't admit him, he shouldered his way in. By what right have you forced an entrance into my home?
The same that gives the right to cling to your boat when drowning. Self-preservation.
Self-preservation?
The snow would cover my body before daybreak. The man strode to the window, pulled aside a heavy black curtain, and looked out.
It is true. You may stay through morning.
With this, he waved me to a seat and resumed his studies. I placed my gun in a corner, drew a chair to the hearth, and examined my quarters. This room was carpetless. The walls were scrawled over with strange diagrams and covered with crowded shelves of philosophical instruments. On one side of the fireplace stood a bookcase. On the other, a small organ, decorated with painted carvings of saints and devils. I saw geological specimens, crucibles, and jars of chemicals, while on the shelf beside me, amid a number of small objects, stood a model of the solar system and a microscope. Every chair had its burden. Every corner was heaped high with books. The very floor was littered over with maps and papers. A dish of ham and eggs, a loaf of brown bread, and a bottle of sherry were placed before me.
I have little to offer you. Your appetite, I trust, will make up for our deficiencies.
I protested, with the enthusiasm of a starving sportsman, that I had never eaten anything so delicious. He sat down to his own supper, which consisted of a jug of milk and a basin of porridge. We ate in silence, and when we had done, I drew my chair back to the fireside. My host, somewhat to my surprise, did the same.
You are the first stranger who has crossed my threshold for more than 4 years. Will you favor me with a few words from the outside world?
I encouraged his questions, and he leaned forward with his chin in the palms of his hands, stared into the fire, and proceeded. His inquiries related mainly to scientific matters, but I was no student of the subject. I was much relieved when he began pouring forth his own conclusions upon the facts which I had been attempting to place before him. I listened, spellbound. I had never heard anything like it then. I have never heard anything like it since. His thoughts poured in an uninterrupted stream from topic to topic, speculation to speculation, like an inspired dreamer. He spoke of the soul and its aspirations, of the spirit and its powers, of prophecies, of ghosts, specters, and supernatural appearances.
The world rejects as false all that cannot be brought to the test of the laboratory. Show me any fact in physics, in history, archaeology, which is supported by testimony so wide and so various as the belief in apparitions. Yet, he who believes is a dreamer or a fool.
He relapsed for some minutes into silence, then added,
I was branded a visionary, ridiculed by my contemporaries and banished from the field I'd given all my best years of life. Since then, I have lived as you see me now. The world has forgotten me, and I have forgotten the world.
He rose, as if desirous of ending the conversation, and went over to the window.
It has ceased snowing,
he observed, as he dropped the curtain and came back to the fireside. Oh, if it were only possible! But even if I could find my way, I could not walk 20 miles tonight.
Tonight? Are you so very anxious? What are you thinking of?
Of my wife, I replied impatiently, who does not know that I have lost my way. He asked from where I'd come, and thought a moment. Then he smiled.
The night mail from the north changes horses there. They pass within 5 miles of this spot, and will be due in about an hour and a quarter. If Jacob were to go with you, you could find your way, I suppose.
Easily. Gladly. He smiled again, rang the bell, gave the old servant his directions, and, taking a bottle of whiskey and a wine glass from a cupboard, he said,
The snow lies deep, and it will be difficult walking tonight.
I would have declined the spirit, but he pressed it on me, and I drank it. It went down my throat like liquid flame, and almost took my breath away.
It is strong, but it will help keep out the cold. And now you have no moments to spare. Good night.
I thanked him for his hospitality, and would have shaken hands, but he had turned away before I could finish my sentence. In another minute, Jacob had locked the outer door behind me, and we were out in the bitter cold. Not a star glimmered. Not a sound, save the crunching beneath our feet, disturbed the heavy stillness of the night. Jacob shambled on in sullen silence, his lantern in his hand, and his shadow at his feet. I followed. My thoughts were full of my late host. His voice rang in my ears and held my imagination captive. I strode on at the heels of my guide, absorbed and unobservant.
Yon's the old coach road. Keep the stone fence on your right.
And how far do I go before the crossroads?
About 3 miles. It's a fair enough road for foot passengers, but too steep and narrow for traffic. Mind where the wall is broken away near the signpost. Hasn't been mended since the accident.
What accident?
The night mail pitched right over it, falling 50 feet or so into the valley below. 4 were killed immediately, they say. The other 2 died the next morning.
How long is it since this happened?
Just 9 years.
Near the signpost, you say? I will bear it in mind. Good night. I tipped the man, and he thanked me before trudging back the way we came. I watched his lantern till the light disappeared, and then turned to pursue my way alone. How silent it seemed now, with only my footsteps to listen to. A strange sense of loneliness stole over me, and though I walked fast, I found it impossible to keep myself warm. I even breathed with difficulty, as though I was scaling the heights of some mountain. I was forced to stop for a few minutes, and lean against the stone fence. As I did, I chanced to look back up the road, and there, to my infinite relief, I saw a distant light. It must be the carriage lamps of some private vehicle, though it seemed strange that any private vehicle should take a road known to be so dangerous. Unless I passed the crossroads by mistake, this was the coach I had come to meet. It came round the bend, and I jumped forward, waved my hat, and shouted. The coachman pulled up. The guard neither answered my hail nor made the slightest effort to dismount. The outside passenger did not even turn his head. I opened the door for myself and looked in. There were 3 travelers inside. I stepped in, shut the door, and slipped into the vacant corner. The atmosphere of the coach seemed colder than the outside air, and was pervaded by a damp and disagreeable smell. I looked at my fellow passengers, all 3 men, and all silent. "How intensely cold it is tonight," I said, addressing my opposite neighbor. I saw that his eyes were turned full upon me, and yet he said nothing. The strange smell inside the coach was affecting me with an intolerable nausea. I turned to my left-hand neighbor and asked if he had any objection to an open window. He neither spoke nor stirred. I lost patience and let the window down. As I did, the strap broke in my hand, and I realized that the glass was covered with a thick coat of mildew. Now I saw that every part of the coach was in a condition of decay, crusted over with mold and literally rotting. I turned to the 3rd passenger, and he looked me in the face without speaking a word. His face was livid, and his bloodless lips were drawn back as if in agony, showing gleaming teeth between. A dreadful horror came upon me. I turned to my opposite neighbor. He, too, was looking at me with the same stony glitter in his eyes. I passed my hand across my brow. The pale light played on their awful faces. The awful faces of the dead. Their hair, dank with the dews of the grave, and their clothes, earth-stained and dropping to pieces, and their hands were those of corpses long buried. Only their eyes, those terrible eyes, were alive, and they were all turned towards me. I shrieked as I flung myself against the door, and the coach reeled like a ship at sea. Then came a mighty crash, a sense of crushing pain, and then darkness. I awoke from a deep sleep and found my wife at my bedside. I had fallen over a precipice and had only been saved from certain death by landing upon a deep snowdrift. I was discovered at daybreak by a couple of shepherds who carried me to the nearest shelter and brought a surgeon to aid my broken arm and fractured skull. The place of my fall, I need scarcely say, was precisely that at which a frightful accident had happened 9 years before. I told my wife of the fearful events, but she treated the adventure as a mere dream born of the fever in my brain. Others may form what conclusions they please, but I know that 20 years ago, I was the 4th passenger inside the phantom coach.
When we came to this house, the minute I saw it, I made up my mind secretly to start writing again in spite of them. But I don't dare let John know I'm keeping this journal. It's difficult being married to a doctor. John's an excellent doctor, I'm sure, but he's so inconsistent about me. He says I'm not really sick, that I'm only a little run down from caring for the baby, that I have a temporary nervous depression. Yet he prescribes phosphates or phosphites, I don't know which, and tonics and exercise. And he absolutely forbids me to work until I'm well again. He hates for me to write a word. But writing is such a relief to my mind. I can write down things, tell things here that... No, John says I'm not to brood about those things. I confess they make me feel bad, so I'll only write about the house. I saw it for the first time today. It's the most beautiful place. John rented it for the summer, and we drove up today, a perfect June morning. The bay and the white sails and people already in swimming, and then the shaded lane and the riotous old-fashioned flowers and the gnarly trees and the house. The house standing alone in the summer stillness. I could never tell John, but you know, the house spoke to me. It was only because he rattled on so that I couldn't hear what...
Reminded me of those English places you read about. Gardeners, cottages, and everything, and had only $200 a month.
Hedges and walls and gates that lock, and there's a ghost in it.
Remember, I rented it just for you, darling. And you're going to let Jenny do all the work while you live like a prince. You like it, darling? Speak up.
Yes, John. Yes, it's lovely, but it's strange, as though it might be haunted.
Darling, you've got that look on your face again. That dopey look. Well, Jean is home, has a station wagon, and if I know my dear sister, she's already turned the place inside out and cleaned it top to bottom.
John, is it haunted, do you think?
What, the house?
Uh-huh.
At $200 a month? Well, that's asking too much of fate. Come on, hop up.
You always laugh at anything you can't touch or see or put down in figures. There is something strange about the house. I feel
If you weren't always imagining.
I'm not imagining. One reason I don't get well is that you don't believe me. You don't even believe I'm sick. You tell my friends and relatives. I've heard you. I've heard you that there's nothing wrong with
There
me.
is nothing wrong with
you. See you saying it
Oh,
again?
I'm sorry. Please don't cry. Now, come along. Let's go inside.
And so I came into this house in tears. It was wrong. It was all wrong. Maybe the house saw me crying, or this room. I got so unreasonably angry with John. I shouldn't, I know. He's so careful and loving, and I repay him so badly. I should control myself, at least in front of him. But it makes me so tired not to show what I feel. Jenny met us at the door. Naturally, she saw I'd been crying, but she took pains to ignore it.
Well, hello, you two. You're early. You must have started at the crack of dawn. How was the trip?
Made it in less than 2 hours.
They're alike as peas in a pod, Jenny and John, both efficient and kind.
And how did you bear up, Pet?
Oh, very well, thank you, Jenny. Both
Okay.
kind and both somehow cruel. But I don't really think that.
Well, you're just in time for lunch. I bought a flounder down at the wharf and cooked it with capers and cream. Sound good?
Wonderful, Jenny.
May I see the house first?
The whole grand tour? Oh, Pet, the flounder'll cook to death.
Well, at least my room.
Our room.
All right, if you insist. But if that fish is spoiled, don't blame me.
Why would I blame her?
Whose room is this, Jenny? Yours?
Uh-huh, it's small, but it's near the door and the telephone.
Oh, John, look.
What?
Let's take this one for you and me. I love those roses over the window.
I've already put your things upstairs, Pet.
Well, this has a little porch and such pretty old-fashioned chintz hangings.
Well,
Let's
you
take
love the
this.
room upstairs, darling.
And you can see there's no room in here for 2 beds.
And I won't hear of being in separate rooms. I'm going to make you rest and take your tonic.
John and I have talked it all over. And the room at the top of the house has so many windows.
And you know, darling, you must absorb lots of fresh air. Get your appetite back.
They smother me with concern. They crush me with kindness.
Come along. There's a good girl.
All right, you know what's best.
And you're going to like that nursery. It gets loads of sunshine.
Up the steep, narrow stairs, 2 stories up to the very top of the house. There's a gate at the top that locks. I wonder why. And beyond the gate is the nursery room. This room. It is big and airy, nearly a whole floor with windows that look every way. They say it was a nursery. But what was it, really?
Open them all, Jenny. Wide.
All right.
Well, darling?
Why are the windows barred?
For the little children. Otherwise it wouldn't be safe.
Oh, yeah, I suppose. Children climb around so, don't they? What are Those rings and things in the wall.
Well, I expect they made it into a gymnasium when the children got older.
A sort of playground.
How they must have hated the wallpaper.
Well, they were rough on it, that's for sure.
The way they've stripped it off in patches. I don't blame them. It's hideous.
Oh, who wants to look at the wallpaper with this view? My, you can see the whole bay.
It's a revolting color. It's unclean. Such a strange, sickish yellow there where the sun's faded it. I never saw worse paper in my life.
Don't dramatize it, darling. You must be hungry, and I know you're tired.
I'm not tired. Why do you both act this way? I say the wallpaper's ugly and you look at each other. Your eyes shuttle back and forth and suddenly you both act as though I'd lost my
Darling, that was something we weren't going to say.
Be a good girl, Pet. We don't act anyway. We just don't want you to worry. We want you to be well.
It's true, that's all they want. John laughs at me, of course, but one expects that in marriage. And he says I have foolish fancies and he sometimes can talk them away, but not this time. No matter what he says, it's a smoldering, sulphurous, unclean, it's hideous wallpaper. No wonder the children scratched at it and stripped it down. No wonder they gouged the plaster with their little fingernails. No wonder they hate it. I hate it myself. And somehow, I feel it hates me. We've been here 2 weeks, and I haven't felt like riding again since that first day. I'm sitting by the window now, up in this frightful nursery room. There's nothing to stop my riding as much as I please. John is away all day, and sometimes even at night if he has a serious case. I'm glad my case is not serious. But these nervous troubles can be depressing all the same. I cry at nothing and cry most of the time. John doesn't know how much I suffer. He knows there's no reason to suffer, and that satisfies him. I suppose John was never nervous in his life. He laughs at me so about this wallpaper.
No, I won't let you have your way, you silly goose. If we'd taken the room downstairs, you'd be seeing faces in the chintz drapes.
Not faces. Look at that spot, John. And that one over there.
Yes, I see. It's a repeating pattern.
It's a broken neck with 2 bulging eyes staring at me upside down.
And to me, it's climbing ivy or some kind of a vine. Take your choice. Could be anything. Besides, I can't repaper a room just for a 3 months rental.
Well, then let's move downstairs. Take me away from it. Don't you see, John? It hates me. I wish I'd get well faster.
Just use your will and your good sense, darling.
I'm afraid.
But you're so much better.
When I married you, I meant to be such a help, and I'm only a burden.
You are a help to me. You're my comfort.
I can't even be with my baby. It makes me so nervous. Will I ever be well enough to see him again?
Of course you'll be well, if you try.
And I'll try, I promise. From now on, I won't look at the wallpaper, and I'll stop seeing things out of the windows.
Out the windows?
Oh, I see people walking up and down the paths and in the arbors. I know it's silly, and it's only in certain lights when I look at the wallpaper from the bed that I see...
See what?
Nothing. Nothing. No, you're right. There's nothing except a pattern. It dwells in my mind so. I lie on that great immovable bed. It's nailed down, I believe, and follow that pattern about by the hour. And then where it isn't faded and when the sun is just so, I see a strange, faint, formless sort of figure lurking, waiting behind that front design. I don't know why I should write like this day after day. I don't want to. I don't feel able. And I know John would think it absurd, but I must express what I feel and think in some way. It's such a relief. There are things in that wallpaper that nobody knows about but me. You know, there's a woman stooping down and creeping about behind that pattern. Last night it was moonlight, and the moon shines in all around just as the sun does. John was asleep, and I hated to waken him, so I kept still and watched the moonlight on the wall till I felt creepy. The woman behind the paper began to shake the pattern as if she wanted to get out. I got up softly and went and felt the paper to see if it did move. It moved! It moved, I'm sure of it. And the poor woman cried out as though her voice came a long way over water. Caravan! Look me! Caravan! Then I went back to the bed. John was awake.
What is it, darling? Why are you up? Oh, you shouldn't go walking around like that. You'll catch cold.
The moonlight woke me.
What? You are cold. You're shivering.
John, I'm not really getting better. Won't you take me away?
Well, Lise will be up in 3 weeks, darling. I don't see how we can leave before then. Of course, if you were in any danger, I would, but you really are better, dear, whether you see it or not. I'm a doctor, and I know.
Oh, my appetite may be better in the evening when you're here, but it's worse in the morning when you're gone.
Why, you're gaining flesh and
I
color.
don't weigh a bit more, not even as much.
Well, bless your little heart. You shall be as sick as you please. But let's go to sleep, huh? And talk about it in the morning.
You won't go away?
How can I, dear? And why should I, since you're better?
Better in body, perhaps, but
Darling,
in mind...
for my sake and your sake and for the sake of our child, I beg you not to let that idea enter your head, not for an instant. Can't you trust me as a doctor when I tell you it's a false and foolish idea? Answer me, darling. Don't you trust me?
Yes, of course I trust you, only...
What?
I'm sleepy. Let's go to sleep.
But I didn't sleep. I lay there for hours trying to decide if the front pattern and the back pattern moved together or separately. At night, in the moonlight, the front pattern becomes bars, and the woman behind it shakes the bars. Yes, she shakes the bar as she creeps around. I lie down ever so much now. John says it's good for me and to sleep all I can, but you see, I don't sleep. And that cultivates deceit, for I don't tell him I'm awake. Oh, no. Fact is, I'm getting a little afraid of John. He seems very odd sometimes, and it strikes me that perhaps it's the yellow wallpaper. I like this room now, and life is much more exciting than it used to be. I have something more to expect, to look forward to.
You see? You're flourishing like a weed in spite of your wallpaper.
Yeah. In spite of the wallpaper. In spite of it. Because of it. But I had no intention of telling him that. He might want to take me away, and I don't want to leave now until I found out. There's 1 week more. I think that will be enough. There's a funny mark on the wall low down near the mopboard. A streak that runs around the room. Goes behind every piece of furniture except the bed. A long, straight, even smudge, as if it had been rubbed over and over and over. How was it done? Who did it? What did they do? Round, round, round and round, round. It makes me dizzy. I've really discovered something at last. There are a great many women behind the pattern, and sometimes only one, and she creeps around fast, and her creeping shakes the pattern. She's trying to climb through and can't because the pattern strangles everything. But she does get out in the daytime. I know because I've seen her. When a car comes, she hides in the blackberry vines. I don't blame her. I'd hide too. I always lock the door when I creep by daylight. There are only 2 days left to tear this paper off and let the woman out in the room. And John's beginning to take notice. I don't like the look in his eyes, or the way he talks with Jenny about me. I overheard them.
She isn't sleeping nights, Jenny. She's quiet, but I know she's awake.
Well, it's little wonder she sleeps the whole blessed day.
Yeah. Maybe I ought to call in another doctor.
No, it's just stubbornness, John. She's determined to prove you're wrong.
I suppose you're right. Oh, I'm sure she'll improve. Oh, darling.
Well, hello, Pet. How you creep about?
Well, that's a funny thing to say, Jenny. It isn't I who creeps.
Jenny says you stay in your room too much. You don't take your exercise.
You tell me to rest, and then you tell me to take exercise. I can't do both.
Well,
As though I can't see through them.
tomorrow's our last day here. We'll talk about exercise when I get you back to town.
I'll have to rouse you out of bed pretty early, Pet. You know, some of that furniture up there belongs downstairs, and the movers will be here at 9.
Maybe you'll sleep upstairs tonight, Jenny. So you won't be alone, darling.
You won't be here tonight, John?
Well, not until tomorrow evening. There's a difficult case.
If you're going to feel
Oh,
lonesome...
no, Jenny. I'll rest better alone, I'm sure. Thank you, Olson. That was clever of me. A sly thing. I won't be alone a bit. As soon as the moon shone in, the poor thing behind the paper began to crawl and shake the pattern. I ran to her. I pulled, and she I shook, and she grew. And by morning, we'd peeled off yards and yards of yellow wallpaper. A strip about as high as my head had half around the room. When Jenny came up in the morning, she looked at the wall in amazement. You know why I did it, Jenny? Just to spite the vicious thing. Why are you so surprised?
Oh, I'm not. Why, I wouldn't mind doing it myself. But you mustn't tire yourself, Pet.
She wouldn't mind doing it.
Why don't you come downstairs and lie down?
How she betrayed herself, that Jenny. She wouldn't mind doing it. But I'm here and no person touches this paper but me. Not a lie. I've locked the door and thrown the key down into the front path. I don't want anybody to come in till John comes. I want to surprise him. And I've got a rope up here. Even Jenny doesn't know that. If the woman gets out from behind the pattern and tries to run away, I can tie her securely to one of the rings in the wall. There, see how the pattern moves, like wallowing seaweeds. Oh, it'll strangle her unless I... Wait, I'll help you. I'll peel off the paper all I can. Wait, be patient. You push. You push and I'll pull. Oh, it sticks horribly to the plaster. I can get it off with my cheek. Oh, it hurts. But I'm getting it. Wait, just a little more. I'm getting it. A little bit more. I wonder if they all came out of the wallpaper. As I did. I think they did. But I have you securely tied by my rope now. You'll never get away. But I don't want to get away. It's so pleasant to be out in this great room to creep about as I please. It's so pleasant. But I suppose I'll have to get back behind the pattern when night comes. That will be hard to do. Well, it's better than going outside. I won't go outside, even if Jenny asks me to. For outside, I have to creep on the ground where everything is green instead of yellow. Here, I can creep smoothly on the floor. So she's coming now.
Open the door. You hear me? Open the door.
Oh, it's John at the door.
Open the door. Open it, please, dear.
How he does pound and shout. It's no use, Dr. John. You can't open it.
Open it, do you hear me, dear? Open it! Jenny, bring me the ice.
Oh, no, he'll break down that beautiful door. John, dear, the key's down in front of the house under a plantain leaf.
My darling,
It's
please.
down by the front door, John.
Open the door, for heaven's sake, open it.
I can't. The key's downstairs, John. It's under a plantain leaf by the front steps. It's under a plantain leaf, John. Go and see. You'll find it if you look. You'll find it. There. She's gone to look. The wallpaper has stopped laughing. The evil thing. Now I can creep slowly, smoothly on the floor. Round and round, round and round. And my shoulder just fits into that long smudge on the wall so I can't lose my way. Oh, he's coming. He's running on the stairs. How astonished he'll be.
Darling. Oh, my dear, what is this? What's happened?
I've got out at last, John.
Out?
Yes, out in spite of you and Jenny. I pulled down the paper. I shook the pattern and pushed and pulled it down. Hey, it stuck horribly. But you'll never put me back. You'll never put me back. You're so pale, John. Why do you close your eyes? You what? Watch how swiftly I creep around in this lovely yellow room. Fainted? Now why should that man have fainted? And
right across my path, Podolo, so that I have to creep over him every time. Run, 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 run.